Elden Ring is headed for PlayStation, Xbox, and PC on February 25th, and that's really not that long. We've been waiting for this one for quite a while. It was announced way back in June of 2019 as a collaboration between From Software and George R.R. Martin. Now, obviously, it shares a lot in common with From Software's other titles, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, etc. But there's some key differences. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, the 10 biggest changes with Elden Ring. Starting off at number 10, this is an open world game. Now, the games from Software are usually well known for being tightly designed, generally linear experiences. Not that they didn't allow for some choice in how you approach things, but none of them are open world games. The experience that we're used to, their bread and butter, it's worked out for them really well. But with Elden Ring, they're trying something new. According to From Software's CEO, who's also the director, Hidetaki Miyazaki, the open world has 6 major areas, and they're all connected to a central hub. Now, this might at first glance sound like something very similar from Demon Souls, but in practice, you can kind of just look at the game and tell how different it is. These are huge areas with a ton of ground to cover. But if you're worried about this game being one of those open world checklist games that we've complained about a little bit in recent years, where you're just clearing markers off a map, it does look like this game is a bit different from that. For one, you actually have to collect these items called map fragments to expand your map. You can't just build out your map by wandering around. You have to find these items to see everything. You can expect to find the usual Dark Souls type locations between the open world parts. It seems like the game's going to have pretty much everything: the spooky forest, the dilapidated castles, and a big old poison swamp, because, you're going to have to walk through that while your health is drained and stuff is attacking you and your stress levels rise. There still seems to be a strong focus on level design, so even if you're an open world game hater, I don't think there's cause for concern here, at least yet. Everything we've seen looks like there's a lot of really interesting places you can explore on foot, and it won't just be running around on a map like taking out outposts, which is frankly not what I want from this game. And also, the open world doesn't just look like it's a place for you to go from point A to point B. There seem to be bosses you can encounter out there, mini dungeons, and unique rewards. Taking the Souls games open world is a risky proposition, but they're making a lot of smart choices, and my fingers are crossed as to 2 things. A, that it's going to be an incredible world to explore, and B, that these choices maybe shake a few companies out of their complacency with open world design. If they've found a way to use an open world that doesn't make you just do checklist crap, it might light a fire under other developers' asses. At least we can dream, right? At number 9, horse riding and horseback combat. To go with the open world, there's a noteworthy addition to the Soulsborne formula: an actual, honest-to-God horse you can ride. The one seen in all the trailers is called Torrent, and it's a spirit steed you unlock fairly early in the game. You can summon horses using a special item called the Spectral Steed Whistle, which you apparently get after using 3 Sights of Grace, which are basically bonfires in this game. Now, that might change in the full game, we don't know, but at least that's how it worked in the network test. Either way, expect to get the horse pretty early in the adventure. The horse isn't just for getting around the world faster either, you can also fight with it. Weapons actually have different attacks depending on whether you're on foot or on mount, and while it might seem like being able to hit and run enemies in a Souls game could really break the difficulty, there are downsides to trying to fight while on your horse. For one, some enemies are really tough to fight on horseback, and if you get hit enough, you get knocked off, which renders you vulnerable for a fairly long period of time. At least a long time, relatively speaking. This is a Soulsborne type battle going on here. One of the cooler things about horse combat is that it's not restricted in any way. You can even fight some of the open world bosses on horseback if you want, though if your horse ends up getting killed in the process, you can't summon them back mid-fight. And if you thought this horseback stuff could cause problems for multiplayer, well, From thought of that as well. You just simply can't use your horse if you're playing co-op or PvP. At least that's how it worked in the network test. And along with the open world, the addition of a mount's probably the most obvious game changer for Elden Ring compared to the studio's previous games. It looks like a lot of fun, but at the moment we don't really know what else you can do with it, or if there's going to be horse armor or anything like that. For most series, this would be a minor thing, but for Soulsborne stuff, this is a big change. It's all rooted in on-foot action, so it will be very interesting to see how it plays out and how it fits in. And at number 8, there are summons which fight for you. On top of being able to get help in the game through online co-op, you can also collect spirits that you can summon to help fight for you in this game. They're called, appropriately enough, spirit summons, and you can call on them using special items called Spirit Caller's Ash that you equip in your quick slot inventory. They're not free to use though, they do cost FP to summon, and there are some restrictions on where and when you can use them. For one thing, you have to be next to a rebirth monument to actually call one of these guys. If you're not around one, then just using the ash doesn't really do anything. You can also only summon them in specific areas, and if you leave that area, they disappear. Further, you can only have one summoned at any given time, so you can't just like roll up on a boss with multiple spirits. And on top of that, you can't summon them in multiplayer. So basically, they're a way for primarily offline players to get some help with some bosses while adding a cool collectible aspect to the game. How exactly you find these ashes, we don't entirely know yet, and apparently the spirits can even be leveled up and made stronger somehow, so we're probably only scratching the surface of how this whole thing works, but I can't help but think about the Final Fantasy VII remake and how summons work there. Obviously it seems a little more restricted, but that was really fun in that game, and I feel like this is going to kind of mirror that dynamic, so I have a feeling it's going to be at least fun. At number 7, weapon arts that are equipable to different weapons. If you've played Dark Souls 3, you probably remember every weapon in that game as something called a weapon art, which was a special move tied to that weapon that you could perform by spending FP. It was a cool feature, but with Elden Ring, they are making it a lot more interesting. With these new Ashes of War, they're calling them, you can now freely equip different weapon arts to whatever weapon you want. There's actually a lot going on with the Ashes of War item. On top of having special moves associated with them, they can also change a weapon's scaling. So instead of having to go to a blacksmith and spend resources to change how a weapon's damage scales, like in the Dark Souls series, you can just equip one of these Ashes of War. For instance, the Keen Ashes of War increase dexterity scaling, while the quality one gives you balance strength and dexterity scaling. If you haven't played these games before, it doesn't really sound like a big deal, but it's actually huge. It's now much easier to create a weapon that works with your chosen stats, and because you can attach and swap out these ashes as much as you want, it's basically harmless to experiment to find something that works for you. So now you can use weapon arts with different weapons and change the scaling to whatever you prefer. You still have to find these things, and certain Ashes of War can only be used with certain weapon types, but apparently you can find them both as rewards for completing mini dungeons and simple enemy drops, and it's possible to get multiple of the same one, so it sounds like there's going to be a lot of options for how you use them. And number 6 is major stat changes. In general, how stats work in this game is basically the same as Dark Souls, so most of the changes are pretty minor, like changing vitality to vigor, but there are some pretty big changes as well. For one, stamina is not quite as important in this game. There still is a stamina bar and it still gets used up when you attack, sprint, block, dodge, just like in the Dark Souls game, but it doesn't seem to drain quite as quickly in Elden Ring. It's not Bloodborne where attacking doesn't use stamina at all, so it's still something you have to worry about, but from everything we've seen and heard, it seems less restrictive. One important change to stamina is how you can now sprint infinitely as long as you're not in combat, which is a welcome change, especially now that we're dealing with traversing an open world. Another huge one is that equipment load in this game isn't tied to endurance anymore, it's tied to strength. So equipment load is a huge deal in the Dark Souls games. It's the difference between the actually useful dodge roll and the dreaded quote-unquote fat roll. For players who don't usually play a strength-based build in these games, this might be cause for concern, but apparently, at least according to people on Reddit, the equipment load given by early levels is much more forgiving in Elden Ring, meaning you don't have to put points into strength to use heavy armor and weapons. Of course, this is all coming from the network test, so things are subject to change, but it sounds like both stamina and equipment load in Elden Ring won't be quite as restrictive as they used to be. And number 5, this game has the kind of stealth we saw in Sekiro and power stances we saw in Dark Souls 2. These are both returning features, but having them both appear in Elden Ring really shows how From is trying to make this a game where character builds really matter. In terms of From Software games, it's not a big change because stealth elements we've seen in Elden Ring look like they came straight out of Sekiro, but with Elden Ring looking to be an evolution of the Dark Souls formula, adding some stealth options feels like a big deal. Instead of forcing players to always blunder head first into a fight no matter what, it's now possible to sneak around and ambush enemies. And it's very similar to how Sekiro works. You press a button to crouch, even the backstab, animations feel similar, but it's great to finally have the option to play a stealth character in one of these games. There's even some gadgets like sleep arrows you can use to knock enemies out. Like we said, another awesome returning feature is the power stances. In Dark Souls 2, if you equipped 2 weapons of the same class, you would get a unique move set. It was an interesting feature that was a little complicated to use because you needed to have stats over 1.5 times the weapon's usual stat requirements if you wanted to use the power stance. But with this game, it looks like that stat requirement's gone, so as long as you're strong enough to equip 2 of the same weapon at the same time, you get a unique move set. Stealth and power stancing, 2 great features. I'm really happy to see them brought back. They didn't really have to bring them back, but the fact they did tells us we can expect some pretty fun builds to mess around with. At number 4, getting around is easier than ever. We already mentioned that you have infinite stamina when you're sprinting around, but there's a few other ways that they've made getting around the world a lot easier and also more fun with Elden Ring. One major change is that there's fast travel now, and you can do it whenever you're not in combat. Yeah, teleporting between bonfires has been a thing since Demon Souls technically, but now you can just do it whenever you want rather than having to run to a save point first. Of course, another major addition is that you can jump. There's a dedicated jump button just like Sekiro, and it makes getting around much easier. Remember the awkward as hell jumping in the old Dark Souls games where you had to start sprinting first? Now you can leap in the air with the press of a button, and it's really liberating. With the inclusion of that in Sekiro, there's really no excuse not to have it in more games. And to go along with all of that, they've made fall damage a lot less lethal. These are all ways that it's easier to get around in Elden Ring, but hopefully it also means the world is more vertical and you've got more of a reason to be jumping around and fast traveling a bit more. And number 3 is hitboxes, and this is a small one, but something we just can't help but notice. Dark Souls, the games didn't always have the best hitboxes. I think anyone who has played them can think of a time where they were killed from an attack that really doesn't look like it connected at all. We're being diplomatic here, but seriously, the hitboxes in these games could be downright bad at times depending on the game. But that doesn't look like an issue here. From many of the Reddit posts we've found, it definitely looks like weapon hitboxes in this game are much more precise in general, so if a weapon doesn't hit you, it won't count as a hit. Seems like it should be obvious, but whew, this is a world where hitboxes are, like I said, putting it diplomatically, not always great, and most hitboxes are just a big triangle, so this is a pretty big and noteworthy change. And number 2 is boss runs. Now, boss runs suck. They're just something you'll have to get used to if you play these types of games. Some From games can be straight up cruel by offering no save points anywhere near a boss, forcing players to sometimes run through an entire level over again if they die at the boss. Like, they've at least gotten a little more forgiving about them in recent years, and with Elden Rings, it looks like they've created a new system to make refighting a boss just a bit less painful. The normal save points in this game are these Sites of Lost Grace, which function more or less exactly like bonfires in the Dark Souls series. You can spend experience to level up, you can restore your healing items, you can fast travel, among other things. When you die, the normal Dark Souls thing happens, you drop all of your souls at the spot you died, and you have to go back and get them. But there's another thing that can also happen, sometimes in particularly difficult areas, and next to certain bosses, there will be Shrines of Marika, which will act as checkpoints. So, if you die, instead of sending you all the way back to the bonfire, you spawn here instead. Now, you can't use them to rest like a normal save point, but at least they let you continue so you don't have to go back through the area all over again. It's a feature that makes this game a little bit more player-friendly, and we're all for that. And finally, at number 1, the crafting kit. Here's another interesting thing. There is actual crafting in this game. Yes, previous games had a kind of crafting system where you could get blacksmiths to make you new weapons, but with Elden Ring, there is a full-blown crafting system that allows you to make all kinds of consumables, single-use weapons, etc., etc. Lots of stuff. You can craft anytime you want, as long as you got a crafting kit and the necessary recipes unlocked, and you can find new recipes by acquiring different cookbooks, which can be purchased or found around the world. Because of this, there's probably going to be a lot of scrounging around for materials in this game, but it sounds like there'll be a lot of items, and you'll not only find them, they'll be dropped by enemies. It seems like they want to give players a lot more options here, and it's nice that we can finally just make arrows on our own in one of these games instead of having to buy them. And we've got some bonus stuff for you too, like particularly time of day changes. It's really minor, and we don't think it really deserves like a full-on point, but it's noteworthy. There's an actual day-night cycle in the game. So many From games have a fixed light progression with the time of day changing at fixed points in the adventure, so that there's a normal just day-night time cycle. It feels pretty unique. Also, Also, apparently certain enemies will only appear at night as well, and other enemies will act differently, so it's not just cosmetic. It's minor, but interesting nonetheless. That's all we've got for you today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.